So in events, let me see. The recording is having fine here. Sorry. I mean, graphical users interface is very important. How you design it, and if you recall, the major difference between Google, Yahoo, and Microsoft MSN was Yahoo pages were very simple, especially search engine. Okay, whereas compared to Google's Yahoo, if you recall a decade ago, there were a lot of information over there, ads, information, and then there was only one search box over there. And again, when you load the page, it may take few seconds, 10, 15, 20, which annoys the user. Whereas in case of Google, was a very simple page, get loaded and you can search it. And in case of Google, you're not given any, you can focus on what you want to search. Whereas in case of Yahoo and MSN, there was a lot of distraction. Okay, so user interface is very critical. Yahoo and MSN, they search engines were strong as well, but Yahoo brought in some new capabilities. Google brought in new capabilities in search engine as well. But the real difference which Yahoo basically make in the industry is the graphical user interface. The use of JavaScript, which Yahoo did, nobody did it before. The asynchronous JavaScript, basically Google stretched its limits, especially the libraries you see D3, the very interactive graphical user interface. Especially, I gave you an example of Qlik Sense. Google is basically behind that drive. So, design principle for creating graphical user interface. Interface should be natural and predictable. We will discuss these in detail as well in upcoming slides. So, it should be attractive and user friendly. We all know it allows user to customize their personal area, and we do see that sometimes. You have, for example, e-commerce website, you have accounts over there, you can customize your look and feel. If you have your web store created using certain store builders, then you can go further. Okay, you can customize your web pages and so on. But how much customization you should allow to the user, because sometimes it might possible that user change the background color and foreground color to for example red, and then nothing will be visible to the user. So we have to avoid these scenarios. Program should be forgiving. This means that if user get trapped somewhere, there should be a way out. It should not be that user don't have any way to just close application and start again. Eventually, we have to understand that graphical user interface is just a mean to get the overall objective. The logic behind coding your application and database, they basically altogether give you a solution. So don't focus entirely on graphical user interface and forget those parts. So you have to basically give importance to them as well. So what do you think? What do we mean by the interface should be natural and predictable? What about natural? Does it say something? Icons. Icons basically represent some real world entities. Okay, so that basically communicate very well to the user what this button will do. So that's one example. It should be natural. It should not be something that can confuse the user. Okay, so real world counterparts can be used as a metaphor in your application. Okay, and according to your application, you identify which one are the best one. And predictable over here, we mean it should be consistent across your website. It's not like that on one icon you have used on one page to mean copy, but on the other page you mean it to do something else, because that will definitely confuse the user or what's going on. Okay. There are some things, core feature we discussed in one of the previous lectures, that okay, navigation and other things which are common in very websites, there are certain practices you need to follow. Okay, if something is on the left side, menus on the left side, it's better to keep on the left side. If there's a login for a certain website, it should not be after 3 or 4 clicks. Okay, so those are the things we need to make consistent across the website. And if your website does not have escape route, and user may need to have to use a back button, then that's not good as well. And again, if there's a way user can go back, sometimes you're representing it as a back keyword, and sometimes you're representing it as an arrow. Again, this will confuse the user. You're not able to pick up those things. So these are the few things which basically, again, are the guidelines when you develop your web pages. For example, over here, you will never see a scroll bar on the right side. Scroll bar is always on the left side. And now because of HTML5 features, which I showed you, that the contents are adjusted according to the screen. Even the bottom bar is no more over there. Okay, if the pages are designed in HTML5, you will not see the scrolling bar unless you make it very small, and then maybe it does appear. But in most of the cases, now there will be no even bottom bar. Fancy fonts, better to avoid them, but I remember when I was doing web development in our company, we basically designed few templates for the client, and the worst template was selected by the client. So again, this is client specific thing. Sometimes you think fancy fonts are not good. In most of cases they were not good, but client may like those fonts and go for it. If some options in menu are not meant for certain user, they should not appear over there. If you cannot do that, they should be grayed out. You should not be able to play around with them. If your website does not demand something like flashing, blinking, better to avoid them. It basically annoys the user. Okay. Third-party plugin. Again, this is very important. If you use third-party plugin and they need user to install on their browsers, then user may be reluctant, especially in today's era of cybersecurity. People are very reluctant to install anything on their site which is being prompted by the application. So better avoid third-party plugins that need some installation on the client browser. So customization, again, you can allow user to play around with this area. Okay, for example, if it's a news website, for example, blogs, how to arrange the post, should it by time, what should be on the right side, the maybe Twitter's feed and so on. So you can allow user to basically customize their area. They can change the image and so on. And we have experienced this when we browse this from websites. But again, customization, you have to be very careful. The customization does not lead to a certain scenario where objective of the application is lost. Okay. The example we discussed, setting the foreground and background color to one coloring scheme. The program should be forgiving. So, for example, you have a shopping cart application, and user basically did some shopping, products are, and then he wanted to view the shopping cart. He clicked the view button, and then shopping cart is visible to user. And on that page, there is no button to continue shopping, or there is only checkout. So in this case, user will not be able to continue his shopping. So you have to give escape route so that user can move around. Okay. It's not the case when user views the shopping cart, the only way is checkout. Okay. User can continue shop. So you have to think of all possible scenarios, and if there's a dead end, you have to provide some escape route from there. Now in previous lecture, one of the previous lecture, we saw that if you use get method in your form, then the data that is being transferred to another page will appear in a query string. So traditionally, programmers need to use that quite often. And in that query string, you can pass even product ID. For example, on one page you have a list of products, and second page you want to show details of the product. So what you can do, you can transfer the ID of the product from first page to the second page as a query string, maybe. And then you can display the product over there. But in this case, you're exposing your database structure and especially the ID to the user. And SQL injections can make use of that very well. Okay, so do avoid these things, especially in if you're using framework and other things. Those things are basically already being developer are being restricted to use those things. But in the past, it was quite common because it was ease of using the application. And new developers basically they also do some mistakes. So we should not indulge in such practice. So you should not be exposed to any underlying architecture or structure of your application, of your database. Their objective is to use the application, enter information, produce a report. They should not be given any information regarding the underlying details. But you have to provide all possible escape routes. So graphical user interface is only a means to end. It's not the thing which you will basically end up everything over there. So you have to decide how much you do, how much graphical user interface you need to enhance and how much you need to do backend coding and so on. But your interface should be like that. It should not confuse the user, or it should not leave the user in a state where he is not able to understand what he should do. Okay, there should be some guideline, there should be some messages to navigate around and so on. So these are the few things which were important. Good interface design may take some time. You need to deliberate all possible scenarios, what user can indulge in, what could be the escape route over here and so on. So it will take time, but it's worth spending time. Otherwise, if you can design by quickly something bad and you can release the product, but later on it will get back to you, and maintenance would be difficult. So modifying graphical user interface components, we saw that button you can do in HTML code, ASP object control code, or you can also do it different ways. So these are the properties which you can manipulate, and you can manipulate using this smart tag, which we saw in few examples before. There are options available. You can set the properties, or you can go in the code, and if I just zoom in for you, you can go in the code and you can change the properties of those controls as well. For example, this is a code in which data source 1 is again the database connection, and in code behind I'm trying to basically set values for the for the SQL statement. Remember, there were parameters, insert parameters, and then a query string. Query string take into account those parameters. So those parameters are set in here. So category name is being set, whatever is being entered in a grid control footer. There was a cat name text box. So there was a grid control, and at bottom row of the grid control there was few empty text fields to add a value, to add a new record. So using grid view, going to its footer and find control method, I can basically retrieve that control, its value, and can assign it to category name, category description, and so on. So this is using code behind. Okay, same thing. For example, the demo I showed you, the guy did in source view. Okay, and there are interfaces available in the pop-up as a pop-up window where you can edit it over there. So there are different ways we can change these things. So now coming to the steps to develop any individual application. We saw that in order to develop any program, you need to basically go through these activities. These are the important steps you need to take into account. You understand the problem, you plan the logic, you code it, and then you select the compiler interpreter that you need to use for your language. Then do the testing of your program, input, output, whether they are according to your expectations, and then you release the code. So in case of event-driven programming, there are some extra test steps you need to perform. And what are those steps? They are listed on this screen. Create storyboards. I'm sure you must have heard of these storyboards. What they are?
Drawing how the pages will work.
Yeah, so you build a story. Okay, if a user will start from page A, he will do this on page A, then this will lead to page B, and so on. So you build a story, you build a narrative. Okay, so we create a storyboards, we define the objects that will be in that story, and when define connection between screens, because story will consist of different screens. So let's look at those steps using an example. This is application we want to build. This is basically about policy premiums. We have two categories: health policy premiums and auto policy premiums. Okay, and this is some further information that our application will take into consideration. So storyboard. For example, you can see example over this. You can think of mock-up screens. Okay, have you used any tool to build these screens? Yeah, you can do it in Visio. Otherwise, there are commercial tools available. For example, if you I used this mockup a few years ago to build these very user-friendly and attractive screens, so that client can identify whether this is what according to requirement or not. Now this is they provide, I think, free, try it free, but they have paid version now as well. So in this case, you have various icons available. Okay, and you can use the icons to build your screen, mock-up screen, and those screen will basically look like this. Okay, and then you can use this screen to report. So there are ways to result.
It's just a graphical representation.
This is graphical representation. So in even development programming, we have graphic user interface that will be exposed to the user. Okay, behind logic, how to do the things, that is in our hand. But how user will interact, what information user want to add, how user want to see, is all about graphic user interface. So that's why in web application development, designing these screens is very important. If you are able to get sign off from the client against these screens, your project is almost done. Okay, behind the scene logic, you can play around with that one. So this is, for example, mock-up screen which we have designed that, okay, there will be a welcome to the premium calculator. We have these options, we have this age, we have these attributes to ask user, and it will, if user click calculate now, it will show a number, and over here and user can exit. So unless we have some number over here, user should not be able to exit. This could be an option. So in short, we identify these screens. Then we have to identify the objects. Okay, if you look over here, these are the basic objects. Okay, these are the controls and controls of the objects we want to use in our application. So like data dictionary, which we use to build our database, we have object dictionary to build our logic, to build our graphical user interfaces. So we have to identify the list of objects that we will use, on which screen those objects will be used, and if there is any code snippet event listener attached to the codes, what they are, we can list them, and what variable will get these listener, the code in those listener will modify. So we can capture this information and we can document this information. What will be the advantage of documenting this information?
We can talk to the stakeholders.
Yeah, and developers are the stakeholders. Your team are the stakeholders. So it is a technical documentation that can help the developer to understand, okay, these are the objects on which screen they are used and how many variables are being affected by this. So before making change in the software, they can look at this documentation and so on. So this is very helpful for the developers. And this is one of the example of object dictionary for insurance premium program. You can see that we have the controls over here, and what will be the object name, how on which screen they will appear, variables affected, and if there is any code attached to them or not. Okay. Once you have that object dictionary, then you can identify all the possible screens, interaction between those possible screens, how the user can navigate from one screen to another screen. So if you have all this, then you can go and plan your logic. Okay. So important one, the major difference was in previous case we did not take graphical user interface and put more time on it. In this case, we talk about storyboards, we talk about objects list, and then how they are placed on those mock-up screens, and also behind the logic as well. And once you have all that information, the navigation, then you can go and perform rest of the steps. Okay. And we have discussed those things before. Okay. So this is how event-driven programming is a little bit different from traditional way of doing programming. Over here we put some emphasis on graphical user interface, and from there we derive what objects would be there and how we can build logic, code behind logic using those objects. Now we will go to the last concept in today's lecture, which is error handling. In your assessment, this is most probably how you did your error handling. If there is an error, you can display error over there. If you have an array, so you can push that error in an array, and then you can basically display that array at the end of your program. So this is how normally we do error handling, and especially this is a traditional way. Okay, and in your assessment 1 you must have done in this way. But there is a better way of doing it, and object-oriented programming basically provides us that way, which is basically exception handling. They take these errors as an exceptional cases in your business logic. Okay, you plan your logic, and there is an exceptional case that this may happen, and then you basically code how to handle that exception. Okay. So this is basically you want to address a certain problem in your logic which is not handled in the normal code, in the normal logic, and you have a special way of handling it. For example, if you divide any number by 0, it will raise an exception. Okay. And traditionally, if exception is raised, the error would be given to the operating system. And sometimes you get an alert that open in a debugger and so on. Okay, but the program give it to someone else. Program itself does not handle that error. Okay, so in this case, we are doing that program should handle this error. It should not give straight away to the operating system and so on. So we are trying to remove all these error handling statements from main logic to a separate class, we can say. Okay, you will have various exceptional cases in your main logic, and in traditional way you will have a lot of if-else statements to cater for those. But exceptional handling, the way we are going to discuss, which is basically try-catch block, we can basically handle all these errors in a specific package or a class, and main logic will not get affected. Okay, so this syntax is being provided in almost every object-oriented programming language. So all the statements which you think of can raise an exception. For example, you are connected to a database. In your lab 4 and lab 5, we did not added this catch block. But if you are connected to certain remote server and remote server is down, your connection object will give you an error. So you can put those lines which can give you certain error in try catch block. Okay, if exception is raised, the control will be given to the catch blocks, and we can have various exceptional handling methods over there. Okay, in short, we have a try catch block. Try block basically contains the statements through which exception can be raised, and that exception will be one of these types. So invalid operation exception, or could be some other exception in case of SQL connection. It will error. It will be SQL connection exception, and so on. And we have finally block as well, which will get executed every time. And in this finally block, if application crashes and none of these exception works, then maybe we can do some log. We can write in a log, or we can set some other variables, or we can redirect user to some other websites or whatever, depending upon the scenario. So this structure basically enable us to remove those if-else statements from main logic to a separate classes. How is that possible in separate classes? This is because of this hierarchy, object-oriented inheritance hierarchy we have in C#. So all the exceptions, for example, out of range, argument out of range exception divided by 0, they inherit from this exception class. So these are some built-in exceptions that are available to us to use in C# programming language. If we have to define our own exceptions, we can basically define them by extending this application exception. For example, you want to your login module, user asks user for user and password, and user and password is inaccurate. One thing is you can just display to the user. Second thing is you can handle this as an exception, and you can raise your exception that this login or password is invalid, and you can handle in this fashion. Okay. So application class provides us to define user related exceptions, and these are some exception classes available in C#. You can see that type mismatch exception, null reference exception divided by 0. If you are doing casting and you did a lot of casting in your first assessment, if the casting was not is not possible, invalid cast exception was raised. Okay. Out of memory exceptions, stack overflow exceptions. So this is a C# program written for C# console. This is not for web application. That's why we have public static void main method. Like C++, you did coding in C++. You have static void method. In Java, you have static void method. Okay. So and you can run this program. You can compile this program like in Java you do Java C file name .c Java. Similarly, you can use a C# compiler to compile. For example, this is for example1.css. And then you can run example1. If you enter example1, it will execute this program. So anyhow, this method basically we have try catch block over here, and we're dividing number 1 by number 2, which is being entered by user. Okay, and if a user enter number 2, it will raise this exception. The control will go to this block.
What would the advantage be of using that try catch block instead of just checking if the num2 is 0 beforehand? Is there like any advantage to that in terms of efficiency or whatever?
You want to check the number before?
It doesn't throw the exception at the operating system.
But I mean, before they even like do that calculation, you go if num2 equals 0.
So So
this message and re-enter it.
you can handle that. You can handle that. But that is one way you basically manage your errors. But what you're talking about, the better way is using it as exceptional handling.
Yeah.
So in this case, your code will be more optimized. You don't need to do that if you have done in this fashion. So this is replacing that if statement.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you can do that. That's fine. But this catch basically the exception we have over here is doing the same task. If by default if somehow user enters 0, we have code over here that can tell the user that your number is 0. You can have an if statement over here which do the same task.
Yeah.
We want to remove those ifs over here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is that more efficient doing it?
This is more efficient in terms of code maintenance.
Alright.
Okay. So if user enters 0, you will be given a message. Okay. So in business logic, all possible scenarios which may go wrong, we can consider them as exceptional. Okay. Like I gave you example of login. If a user, each user in an organization would have that different access rights. If user is trying to access something, again it will raise an exception, and user would be given a proper message that okay, you tried to access this table, because of these access rights you're not able to do it. If you want to do it, you generate this request or email to this person. Okay. So we can handle using creating our own exception classes. For example, over here, instead of using that by default exception, what I'm using, I'm creating my own class which is negative num exception. If user enter negative number, I will raise this exception. Okay, and this class is inheriting all the features of application exception. So this is class I have created, and then in future I can use this class in my main logic. So what this class does, this class basically have two constructors. Whenever this class object would be created, we can pass, for example, this constructor without message and this constructor with message. We can have multiple constructors in a class. Okay, and whenever we create an object, constructor is called. If object is created without an argument, then this default message would be displayed as an error in your logical program. If a user is passing some string like a message that don't do this again, this is last time you're doing it, next time your account will get blocked, then we can call this way, we can create method in this way. Let me show you an example used over here. Yeah. For example, this is a scale root program, and we don't want user to enter a negative number. If user enters a negative number, then neg number exception would be raised, and we are creating object over here which is ES. As soon as this catch block will trigger, EX would be object would be created, and EX.message would be written on the console. In this case, I did not pass any message to EX object, so by default this message would be displayed to the user. Okay. So exception handling provides us a better way of handling these errors which traditionally were handled within the main logic. We can separate it. It increases the performance of your program as well, because these exception classes are compiled. We can cache them. Okay, we can cache them, and it increase your performance of your web application as well. But the real objective we want to achieve is easy maintenance. Okay, the maintenance would be very easy. You can easily update this logic over here. In this case, if you want to do something regarding this exception, only this class needs to be updated. And if this class has been used 1,000 times in your main logic, that's fine. Okay, and that's the strength we get from object-oriented programming languages. So in object-oriented programming, what we did, we created a separate module, separate class to handle the errors. So main logic only detect the errors, and then control go to that specialized class that is handling the error. So that's it for today. So I showed you certain demos, especially regarding your assessment. Those are critical because there's no class next week, and after that there's 1 week break as well. So you have almost 2.5 weeks to decide which how you will basically attempt your second assessment. You can attempt your second assessment using web forms, and that we will do in upcoming lab as well. If you're going for MVC or entity framework, then you have to start working now. You need to build up your knowledge. You can forward me your queries. I can direct you to some resources. There are also a lot of YouTube videos available as well if you are going for MVC or interactive framework.
How much more complicated do you reckon this second assignment is compared to the first?
Complicated, not much. The logic is same, but in this case, if you see, development is quite easy. Drag, drop, add, edit, delete in no time. Okay, so if you know, if you were able to do labs well, you can easily do your assessment. Okay, building the logic, you have used this logic in your assessment one. Same logic is being repeated over here. So your C# code may get reused as well. So over here, important, the challenge is to, if you go for MVC and utility framework, then the challenge is you have to build more knowledge. If you're using web forms, then again challenge is how to basically use these web forms, the controls, how to configure them and how to manipulate them. I also asked you to upload pictures, files as well. So that would be, again, you need to figure out. I think I will not be giving you any code. I will provide you help, but these are the things you need to figure out. How to export your results, I think that's also one option over there. So there's a lot of help available on the internet, how to export, if you have data in grid or on a page, how to export it to Excel and so on. So I think similar efforts will be required. Okay. So we discussed about the graphical user interface, and the real strength comes from the control, and how each control basically have certain listeners attached to them, and you need to know how to manipulate those listeners, how to code, how to basically set those properties are in code behind, how to manipulate those. Graphical user interface are very important because end user interact with those graphical user interface. He does not know about how excellent classes you have developed, how much excellent exception handling you have done. Interface is the key for him. Okay, exceptional handling, all those stuff, they are for your advantage, for easy maintenance. Interface is very critical, so it should be natural, sorry, this type over there, predictable, easy, user friendly, and so on. Allows user to customize, but again you have to see where you should stop the user for the customization of the, and storyboards are very critical when you're designing event-driven applications. That will help us to identify the dead end and how the escape route you can provide those users. And object-oriented programming, error handling provides a lot of advantages, especially in code maintenance, especially in medium scale to bigger objects. Developers always opt for this option. Okay, so in your assessment too, you can also use this approach if you want. Okay, but there are no marks allocated for exception handling. All the marks would be definitely by default what we are doing in the lab, the web forms and using those web forms. These are a couple of readings. You can go through them. Again, these will not be part of your exam. Okay, these are just for knowledge to develop these concepts further. So that's it. Any question? Yep.
I want to ask that if we're not studying next week, so that we have 2 weeks, right? Is it?
Yeah, this is 2 weeks. In these 2 breaks, you can look at assessment. We have to design a database. Although in lecture 8 we will discuss about database, but I'm sure you have some knowledge of database. So you can work on your database, you can design your database, and you can watch these videos, demo videos. They provide you enough information to start working with your assessment. Labs are already uploaded. You can start doing your labs in advance, and you can maybe start working on your application ahead of time. Anything else? No? Okay, thank you very much. Then I will see you in the lab. Yeah.